It's not clear what Theresa May's pause on nuclear was all about, but today it was all systems go. Should we, though, have allowed China such a critical role in our national infrastructure? Also on News at 10 tonight. She's back, but Hillary Clinton clearly now has a fight on her hands.
I have to say it's great to be back on the campaign trail.
It has long been our closest ally in the Middle East. Now MPs urge the government to ban some arms sales to Saudi Arabia. It's not just health treatments that are being rationed. New figures showed that there are 25% fewer people receiving care services than were 5 years ago. And the power of the Paralympics, how the Games are inspiring some of the street children of Rio.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. So it is full steam ahead for the new nuclear power station at Hinkley Point in Somerset. It's not really clear what the delay was all about. Perhaps it was just an indication of our new Prime Minister's innate caution. Nothing wrong with that, perhaps. But tonight, News at 10 has worrying reports about Hinkley's sister station in France, most notably that the wrong kind of metal was used in a key part of the construction. Not very reassuring, you might think, and we'll have more on that in a moment. But the Prime Minister does now seem to feel that the deal, with a couple of amendments, is fundamentally all right.
On the shores of the Bristol Channel in Somerset, next to the disused Hinkley Point A and ageing Hinkley Point B, there will now be a Hinkley Point C, confirmed today after what the government called a comprehensive review, but you had to look hard to find the changes.
This £18 billion investment in Britain provides an upgrade in our supply of clean energy. When it begins producing electricity in the middle of the next decade, it will provide 7% of the UK's electricity needs.
What the government said was an improved deal will ban the French builder EDF selling its stake in Hinkley Point to China or anyone else without ministers' approval. And the government will now own a share in all future nuclear projects after Hinkley, so it has more control. But there was no change to how the plant will be built or the French and Chinese involvement in it. And no change to the high fee, the £92.50 for every unit of energy produced.
In the end, all they've done is pretend to give themselves powers which they already possessed. It is face-saving by a government that talked big and eventually backed down with a whimper.
Unions representing EDF workers in France don't like it either. At a protest in Paris today on other matters, one said the state-owned company had bitten off more than it can chew. But EDF's boss was visibly relieved.
We're talking about 2025, 2030, 2040. And the conclusion of the review is, yes, indeed, the price is competitive and it is a good deal for the customers.
David Cameron visited Hinkley in 2013. Theresa May has now reviewed his homework and came to the same conclusion. It's about keeping the lights on. And it always was, said the Energy Secretary, who drew up the plan.
I don't know whether it's going to be good value or bad value. I'm quite frank about that. What I do know is we need the power to keep the lights on, to keep our industry going, to make sure people can watch the TV and boil the kettle. And we need the low-carbon electricity.
And more low-carbon electricity is being planned by the Chinese at a site at Bradwell in Essex, this time with their own money and their own technology.
Had Hinkley not gone ahead, then it would be very unlikely for there to be, a deal with Bradwell. Obviously,
nuclear would have been dead in the water if they put too many caveats on this one.
I think it would have been quite hard to see politically how they could have persuaded another company to invest.
So a revised deal this was, but it didn't revise too much. Chris Ship, News at 10.
Ending the uncertainty over Hinkley C will be a relief for those businesses who stand to benefit most from its construction, but it won't be plain sailing. Our business editor Joel Hills has discovered that the EDF plant in France, which Hinkley is being modelled on, has a problem with its steel reactor vessel that holds the nuclear fuel.
At this electrical engineering company, they're celebrating. The Hinkley circuit breaker has been removed. Now surely it's all systems go. And as a local business, they stand to benefit.
It's going to be massive. We're looking to double the size of our, not only double the size of the factory, but obviously double the staff.
EDF says building Hinkley C will create 25,000 new jobs, 900 of them permanent. Its 2 reactors will generate enough electricity to power 6 million homes for around 60 years. But the National Audit Office calculates that top-up payments to deliver the strike price the government has promised EDF will add up to £30 billion to consumer energy bills over 35 years. EDF's new reactor design is also unproven. 4 are under construction, none are operating yet. This one at Flamanville in France is 6 years behind schedule and €7 billion over budget. In 2014, EDF installed the steel reactor vessel, which holds the nuclear fuel. Last year, the French regulator identified serious anomalies with the way it had been forged and ordered EDF to investigate. This is a copy of an internal presentation by Arriva, the company that made that reactor pressure vessel at Flamanville, and it shows that initial tests carried out on parts made for other pressure vessels, including one originally intended for use here at Hinkley, have identified similar weaknesses. The steel has excessive carbon in it and is therefore more prone to cracking. The former nuclear engineer who obtained the report says the early signs are that Flamanville is in serious trouble.
If the Nuclear Safety Authority says it has to be removed, it doesn't satisfy the basic safety requirements, then that reactor will have to be scrapped.
And what are the chances of that happening?
I would say quite high on the evidence I've looked at.
EDF insists Flamanville will be in service by 2018 and that there will be no such setbacks at Hinkley, as the reactor vessel will now be made elsewhere. EDF and CGN, the Chinese state-owned company, have been industrial partners for 30 years. They plan 3 projects together in Britain. At Hinkley, CGN will stump up £6 billion in return for a 33% stake in the plant, which EDF will design and build. At Sizewell, CGN will be the junior partner when EDF builds 2 reactors there. But CGN wants to design and build a nuclear plant of its own at Bradwell, a project it will take a controlling stake in.
This Hinkley Point C project will be China's first nuclear investment project in developed countries. So that represents a major turning point for China's nuclear export.
At Hinkley, EDF and CGN will share the financial cost of construction, any delays, and if it comes to it, failure. The risks for the 2 companies are great, but so are the rewards. Joel Hills, News at 10, Hinkley Point.
And Chris Shipp is here with me now. Chris, in the end, did you ever get to the bottom of what this pause was all about?
Well, look, as we said on this programme last night, we can't describe this as a wholesale change. They didn't get the deal. They didn't turn it upside down and turn the pockets inside out, if you like, and things like the strike price, that high price we're paying, is still the same. I sort of think if she had done that, she would have opened herself up to all sorts of a can of worms in terms of our Brexit negotiations, because she'd have annoyed the French, and Chinese foreign investment in this country, because she would have annoyed them. That said, you can't say there's no change here. And I was struck when the Business Secretary, Greg Clark, said in the Commons earlier, we are trying to remedy the weakness of the previous operation. And Downing Street say that Theresa May was quite surprised when she asked everyone to kick the tyres, that there wasn't these extra checks in there, this critical infrastructure, it's nuclear power, and she was surprised that that wasn't in there. And in other words, she doesn't think David Cameron really did his homework.
Yeah, doesn't seem a massive fan of David Cameron, does she? But that's another story. Is MPs, do they feel briefly that it was a good deal in the end?
Well, look, it's expensive. I think you cannot deny that. And, when I talk to MPs on the Energy Committee who know a lot more about this than I do, they say, yes, it's expensive. Yes, the price of nuclear is going up when offshore wind is coming down. But at the end of the day, if you want to mix, and if nuclear is part of that mix, then you need this, and you've got to get on and start building it.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Most people know that pneumonia can be quite a serious illness and it's best treated with caution. In this context, 4 days off work doesn't sound like very long, but Hillary Clinton clearly feels there is no time to lose now, and she's probably right. So she's been holding a rally this evening. She told cheering supporters it was good to be back on the campaign trail.
It was always going to be a carefully choreographed return. And so it was that after 4 days off, Hillary Clinton was back on the road to the strains of I Feel Good.
I have to say it's great to be back on the campaign trail. As you may know, I recently had a cough that turned out to be pneumonia. I tried to power through it, but even I had to admit that maybe a few days of rest would do me good.
After that rest, this was without question the most anticipated speech of her campaign so far.
There are just 54 days till Election Day, just 54 days till the most consequential vote of our lifetime.
And after days of speculation, she had a message and a rallying cry.
But nobody ever accuses me of quitting, and I will never give up. I'll never walk away, no matter how tough the going gets. Please come out and help us fight. Fight for you, fight for our children, fight for our families. Let's make America all that it should be. Thank you, and God bless you.
It was rousing stuff, and it needed to be in order to counter these images filmed on Sunday as she struggled to stay upright after becoming dehydrated while suffering from pneumonia. Her illness has significantly changed the campaign, with the focus shifting to physical fitness. Whilst voters have heard from Hillary over the past days, it's Trump they've seen.
And in all fairness, she's lying in bed, getting better, and we want her better. We want her back on the trail, right? We want her back on the trail.
But for all the supposed good wishes, he's playing the health card as hard as he can.
I don't know, folks. You think Hillary would be able to stand up here for an hour and do this? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so.
It's proving a winning message with the Trumpeteers.
Hillary's health is declining. I've heard she has a body double that makes a lot. I've even heard rumors that a doctor has said she's got the symptoms of Parkinson's. She has oncoming Parkinson's disease. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I heard that she's probably going to have to drop out of the race.
Come on. The only thing you're going to see is more people jumping on that Trump train and everybody jumping off that Hillary, whatever you want to call it.
Mr. Donald Trump.
To keep up the health pressure as well as fueling the speculation, Donald Trump used TV studios to release some of his medical history.
When you're running for president, I think you have an obligation to be healthy. I just don't think you can do the work if you're not healthy.
Hillary Clinton is all too aware of the scrutiny she'll now face. It may be only 54 days to the election, but they are likely to feel very long indeed.
Emma, I'm sure Hillary Clinton's supporters were bowled over by Donald Trump's sincerity there, but were they buoyed up by her performance, do you think?
I think they probably were buoyed up. They would be incredibly relieved that she'd actually got there, got back out on the road and managed to deliver the speech that she did without coughing and without really faltering. And it was a speech that looked at family, finance and faith. That hits well with the voters here. But what they are going to be really concerned about is the coming week. She's done that event, and when you watched her, she was moving quite slowly. Her breathing seemed to be quite shallow, and there was a look of uncertainty in her eye. So I suspect that they will be worried that she's got to sustain this pace for the best part of 2 months. So it's certainly not going to be easy, but she's got the first one under her belt tonight.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. The race certainly is far from over. Now, there have long been claims that we are much too close to Saudi Arabia. It is a mostly stable country in an unstable region, it's true, but by most reckonings, it's governed by a highly autocratic regime with a very questionable human rights record. Since it started bombing targets in Yemen more than a year ago, there have been accusations that British-made weapons are being used in attacks that break international law. The Saudis, with British and American support, have been trying to restore Yemen's former president and contain rebel fighters. Finally today, MPs said enough was enough and called for a halt in arms sales to Saudi Arabia.
The Emir of Qatar was in town today. He and the Prime Minister discussed Brexit, Syria and the World Cup. But only after prompting did Downing Street admit they also talked about Yemen, where Qatar is part of a Saudi-led coalition fighting Houthi rebels. But the conduct of that war has been highly controversial. Earlier this year, ITV News reported from Mustaba near the Saudi border, where 119 people, including 24 children, were killed in a coalition airstrike. And today, 2 House of Commons committees said UK arms sales to Saudi Arabia must stop, while alleged breaches of international law are investigated.
The government needs to take action to push for United Nations-led international investigation, and also to, until that time happens that investigation can take place, that we pause in the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia.
But in an almost unheard of parliamentary dispute, another committee of MPs had said arms sales should continue until the claims of atrocities are verified.
I think it's important to remember that Saudi Arabia and the coalition of other countries are acting under a UN mandate. It is a UN Security Council resolution which has put this coalition together. And so it should be the UN that determines this outcome of this by setting up an independent inquiry.
And of course, Britain has spent years developing a relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is regarded as a key strategic ally in the fight against international terrorism. Downing Street says the key test for continued arms sales to the Saudis is whether there is a clear risk they might be used for serious violations of international humanitarian law. Campaigners say that test has been met. But so serious have been the reports of human rights violations in Yemen that a High Court judge has granted one campaign group a judicial review of British arms sales to Saudi Arabia.
The fact that this judicial review is even taking place is a sign that there's a real clear risk that UK arms are being used to violate international humanitarian law. And the UK has been called out by some of the most respected NGOs in the world. Some of the abuses which have been carried out by Saudi forces have been documented by the United Nations.
The UN thinks 3,800 civilians have been killed in the 18-month campaign, and in that time it's thought Britain has sold £3.7 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia. Increasingly, MPs are joining campaigners in saying that must stop. Carl Dinnan, News at 10, Westminster.
If you were watching News at 10 last night, you will have seen our somewhat disturbing report on the way even basic health services are now being rationed. But it's not just the NHS that is feeling the strain. Today, a study of social care in England suggested that the number of people receiving state funding had fallen by a quarter as local authorities cut back spending with the elderly hardest hit. And as you might expect, some cuts are causing really serious distress.
I have to get up at 5:30. Do a medication, do a food. In between that, I've got to do a bit of housework. 10 o'clock, I'd start getting ready for bed, get ready for bed and get myself ready for bed. Just a sandwich.
For thousands of people like Phil Armstrong, being a full-time carer is more than a full-time job. His wife Yvonne has a heart and lung condition requiring oxygen that confines her to the house and demands 24-hour care. But they're at risk of losing the help they currently receive 3 times a day and 2 nights a week, which they say is vital to give Phil a break.
It takes a lot out of you, because you're having to look after somebody that can't do nothing for themselves. It'd be all right if Yvonne could do something herself, but she can't.
The local NHS, which funds the care, says Yvonne no longer meets its criteria, and Phil is appealing, but their predicament is increasingly common. A report today found that over 5 years, council spending on care for older and disabled people has fallen in real terms by 11% in England, and while the number of people aged over 65 is growing, the number being helped has dropped by a quarter, from more than 1 million to 850,000.
What we don't know is actually what's happening to those people. Are they more reliant now on their families and friends to act as carers? Are they paying for somebody to come in and support them, which, by the way, is very expensive? Or what we know is happening is that a growing number of people are just going without.
Care companies are at risk too. Housing and Care 21, one of the biggest not-for-profit providers, says it's pulling out because it can't provide good quality for the money. And tonight in Birmingham alone, I'm told there are hundreds of patients waiting to be discharged from hospital who can't be because community care isn't in place. It's the same up and down the country, causing problems for the NHS that trickle right the way down to A&E. And now an alliance of leading national charities has come together accusing the government of failing to plan for us all getting older.
Both the NHS and social care are at breaking point now. If you ask anybody working in either side of that partnership, they will tell you that they can't cope.
Phil tells me he's been asked if he has relatives who can step in.
You don't ask your family to help you out because they've got their own life to lead. So I think it's wrong what they're doing.
The government says it is investing in the care system, but it is people like Phil who are now shouldering the burden of our ageing population. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Birmingham.
In a week in which the BBC has announced it is losing Bake Off, not to mention the chair of its trust, the omens were perhaps not looking too good for the publication today of its draft charter, effectively the corporation's operating agreement with the government. But actually, the two sides seem to have emerged with honours about even. The government has got the BBC to agree to publish which presenters get paid more than £150,000, but the BBC has held on to the independence of its board.
Playing Guess the Star's salary is about to get a lot easier. It was already known that those earning more than £450,000 a year, including Gary Lineker and Graham Norton, would have their salaries published. Now the BBC will have to name more than 100 staff with salaries of £150,000 or more, including several well-known presenters and journalists.
The government wants a BBC.
The new Culture Secretary says it's all about transparency.
The Charter sets out new obligations in this regard, including publishing the salaries of those employees and talent who earn more than £150,000.
But what do those on the payroll think?
At the moment, I'm thinking I don't really mind. I might as well just open all the doors and the windows and tell the public everything because they own it.
And you wouldn't be upset if they disclosed your salaries?
I don't think I mind them giving information to the public. The public own the place.
David Cameron had wanted to limit disclosure to only the highest paid, but it seems his successor had other ideas. The former Culture Secretary says it's a big win for Theresa May.
It is important that people should know where their money is going. The BBC is publicly funded, and the figure which has now been fixed upon, 150,000, that is 1,000 licence fee payments, and licence fee payers deserve, therefore, to know where their money is going.
Management see this as a poacher's charter. The Director General of the BBC, Tony Hall, issuing a statement saying that the publication of salaries would make it harder to retain talent. Nevertheless, the government has given ground in one crucial area, namely over who runs the BBC. There'll be a new 14-member unitary board replacing the current management structure. The government has backed down from plans to appoint most members. Instead, it will choose the chair and 4 national directors for England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The BBC will choose 4 executives and 5 independent members. But what of the potential loss of talent?
It's a very easy line to put. You know, the BBC should be transparent, public money, so on and so on and so on. But look at the language they use. They keep talking about the civil service and civil service norms. Do people really want the 10 o'clock news presented by the Department of Work and Pensions? I don't think so. You want Hugh Edwards or whoever, you know.
Mrs May seems to believe the public want their stars, but only if they're good value for money. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Westminster.
Yet another milestone was passed by Paralympics GB in Rio today. 100 medals won. Not everything went according to plan, though. Wheelchair racer David Weir missed out on a medal again today. Our reporter Richard Pallow is there again tonight with an update and a story about the power of the Paralympians to inspire others. Richard, good evening.
There are 3 full days here to go in Rio, but it's the end of one Paralympic career that is dominating the headlines. David Weir has announced his retirement from track racing. He struggled all week, to be honest. This is him in white at the back of the pack in the 800 metres. He hasn't been on formal games. He dominated London, of course, but today he said, enough's enough. I'll compete in the relay on the weekend, the marathon to go, but that is me done, the end of one of our greatest ever Paralympians. And instead it's been 2 other sports that have given us our glut of gold today, 2 slightly more unusual sports, if you want. Dressage has given us 3 gold through Sophie Christiansen. She defended her title that she won in 2012 along with Natasha Baker in her class, and the pair combined for team gold. And then there's para-canoeing and the debut of Jeanette Chippington, 2 more golds there. But really these are stories for now. It's about inspiring others in the future, and I met one such boy today on Copacabana Beach.
Like most youngsters here, David Santos is sports mad, and in the waters of Brazil's most famous beach, a demonstration of his desire to represent the country in swimming. He used to want to be a footballer, but an injury in April changed all of that. In search of adventure, he jumped between moving trains, and as he fell, the wheels sliced straight through his leg.
Eu pensava que eu ia morrer, eu gritava pensando que ia morrer, pedindo ajuda a Deus, força a Deus, e Deus me deu essa força de superar tudo isso e ter mais uma oportunidade de sobreviver em outra experiência.
David only survived because there happened to be a trauma hospital nearby. He was there for 1.5 months. At the age of 15, and with no family or place to live, it was the charity Street Child that gave him a chance to adjust and to watch the games in person.
Várias. Muitos. Eu achei muito irado. Pessoa com uma perna correndo, pulando obstáculos, só com uma perna só, andando de bicicleta com uma perna só também. É muito irado a pessoa. É muito massa, muito bacana assistir essas pessoas assim, se inspirar nessas pessoas.
But in spending the day with British Paralympians, it was they who ended up inspired.
It's only been 2 months, so I was like, wow, really surprised. I've played with amputees before. I always admired them and stuff. It's a bit hard when you hit you in the leg with the crutches, but unbelievable.
This all in a matter of months. In 4 years' time, well, who knows?
Good luck.
Richard Paolo, News at 10, Rio de Janeiro.
Great story. Now, finally, as the list of winners of the past 25 years shows, the annual Mercury Prize is not a bad guide to the music of the moment. So for all those who are not too familiar with the kind of rap music known as grime, there was a bit of an introduction to it tonight when the award went to the singer Skepta. Here he is for his album Konnichiwa. It is, the critics say, grime music's coming of age.
Skepta.
In a diverse and tough field, it was British grime act Skepta who was celebrating tonight.
I don't know, man. I'm just so thankful. I've been trying to do this music stuff and work it out for so long, but it was the moment where I was like, yo, let's kind of do this for ourselves.
When it shut down, that's not me and it shut down. Ring, ring.
The North Londoners' fourth album, Konnichiwa, has won huge acclaim and led to a resurgence in an urban music style that originates in the UK.
The Mercury Prize, awarded annually for the best album in the UK and Ireland, has long been recognised as a prestigious platform for acts old and new. This then truly is a coming-of-age moment for British grime music.
It is a real important year in our short history, really. You know, it's only 15 years ago when we started this kind of music and was on the pirate radios. Just to see us here, we've come such a long way.
Look up here, I'm in heaven.
The favourite had been David Bowie's album Black Star, his farewell to the world, released in January, just days before he died from cancer.
I've got drama, can't be stolen. Everybody knows me now.
Tonight, the American actor Michael C. Hall performed that song Lazarus from the album. Hall, best known for his role in Dexter, was chosen to play the lead in Bowie's musical Lazarus off Broadway last year.
I've got nothing left to lose.
No one had known then, he says, that the album was his last act.
The show generally, Lazarus, everything is recontextualized now, and the fact of Bowie's passing and the way in which he exited, it's sublime, really.
Rest in peace, David Bowie. Rest in peace.
And from the winner Skepta to all the nominees, tonight Bowie was on everyone's mind. Nina Nanar, News at 10.
Let's just take a very brief look at what might be coming up tomorrow. Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, who is still, believe it or not, holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, will find out tomorrow if a Swedish court has decided to overturn the European arrest warrant over claims of sex offences in Sweden. And who will get the job of filling Nigel Farage's shoes? The result of the UKIP ballot for a new leader will be announced tomorrow. Lunchtime should be well worth looking out for. Julie will be here for that. I'll be back on Monday. For now, good night and thank you very much for watching.